Hi, I'm Jeff Miller.
I'm Anthony Navarro, and welcome to Talk Out Loud, where we share the LGBTQIA+ narrative one story at a time. On this episode of Talk Out Loud, we're here with Lisa Cordileone. Lisa is a writer, producer, and actress who continues to find her way in making her art reflective of inclusivity and empowering women. With such works as Freelancers Anonymous and Easy Abby, her body of work continues to expand and represent women in tech. Through all of this, she's learned how to deal with fear and shame and strives to help change the trajectory for the next generation of women. Let's hear Lisa's story. Lisa Cordileone, you are here.
Yes, I am.
How are you?
I'm good.
Thank you so much for being here with us. We're really excited to have you here. I know the cat's out of the bag that we've both known you for, well, I've known you for a long time. Jeff's known you for actually the same amount of time, but we're really excited to have you today.
I'm excited to be here.
Yay.
Yay.
The dogs are just as excited as well, too. Mickey is in heaven with Lisa
Mickey's
here.
very excited.
All of the dogs, even Pop-Tart.
Yeah, POP.
Well, she's on my lap now.
Okay.
So, Lisa, you and Anthony know each other from Chicago, and then I eventually met you there as well, too. We're here in LA. How long have you been here?
I've been in LA, I'll say 5.5 years.
5.5 years.
Yeah. There's not a firm date. I shuffled around back and forth between LA and Chicago, and yeah, I'd say like 5.5 years.
You kind of flirted a little bit. And then,
I flirted with it for a little while, and then I fell in love.
You dated.
Yeah, we dated.
Yeah.
We courted. Proper.
So, Lisa, you and Anthony know each other from Chicago and also myself, but where did you grow up?
I grew up in upstate New York until I was like 13 years old. And then my family, we got moved to Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area in North Carolina. So I went to middle school, high school, and college down there. And then, and then from there I ended up landing in Chicago.
So really fast, going back, why, you said your family got moved. Why did you have to move?
All of my family, going back, even my grandparents, 3 of my 4 grandparents worked at IBM. And I'm from the town where IBM started.
In upstate New York?
In upstate New York. And so my parents both worked at IBM. My mom just retired after like 40-something years.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So it was closing down upstate. And so I remember like a lot of my friends were either moving to like Burlington, Vermont or Raleigh, North Carolina. So we ended up in North Carolina. I think my parents were done with the winters, so shoveling snow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So how old were you? What age when you moved to?
I was like 12 or 13. The move was very actually important in my life as I like look back on it.
How so?
It like, I love thinking about that's the question. A couple of reasons. I'm a pretty shy person. I'm like, what do they call it? Like an introvert? An introverted extrovert or an extroverted introvert? That's what it is. Extroverted introvert. I have my moments. I like one-on-ones, or I like being like on a stage with a lot of people. But if there's a party of 15 people, I shut down. It's kind of what happens.
I totally understand that.
You get that? Yeah. So when I moved, 2 things happened. One, I went to like 3 middle schools between New York and North Carolina and moving till we got a house and all this kind of stuff. So me and my older brother, who's a couple of years older than me, just became very close, fast friends. And whenever he met someone, he introduced me to them and I did the same. And then we had a lot of the same friends throughout high school. So we just formed this very close relationship with each other.
You were your own clique. You brought everybody together under the 2 of you.
We did. Well, we tried to help each other out, I feel like, which was great. And then it helped me come out of my shell. You know, it was really scary moving. It was like a whole other world.
Yeah, I totally can't relate to that at all. Like I lived in the same house. I went to the same school, had the same friends.
That's what mine was growing up too when I moved. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that would have been like at that age to be able to lose all of that and then have to go, and have to sort of start all over.
There's something interesting when you have just one person who arrives, but then you've got 2. it's almost like there's something of like a story. Oh, what's your brother's name? Remind me.
Brian.
So, it's Brian's sister Lisa. Lisa's brother Brian.
Yeah.
It just is something you start to almost tell a story about. Who are these people? There's two of them. There's something even about science where you see two people on a screen versus one. How like the eyes play off each other. Even like, obviously twins would be a good example of that. But even with siblings, there's something there that you can tell people automatically just like, oh, what's the story here?
Yeah. And my little brother probably had it even different because I don't want to leave Steven out. But he's like 5 years behind. So it was maybe a little bit, different story for him.
Maybe a little easier for him.
Yeah. I think.
Yeah, because he just wasn't as in school. He wasn't as advanced.
Yeah, he's younger. Yeah, when he moved.
So this is like you said, 12, 13 for you.
Yeah.
So teenage years.
The most awkward.
Yeah, right. That's one thing.
It's like the worst years. It's like the middle of middle school.
So did you know, as far as like coming of age to yourself, like feelings for developing for people?
I know. I didn't even ever think about that. There wasn't really like internet or anything. I mean, it was like, I don't want to like date. I'm still young, but we didn't have access.
Yeah.
We weren't thinking about those things. We were just being kids. Like I played soccer and I was on a club team and did travel. And like, that was my life. I played sports and did all that kind of stuff. And I always had boyfriends. I had a boyfriend in middle school and high school. And I always had boyfriends in high school. And I mean, in high school, I could definitely tell I was like just not interested in the boys, but I never really knew I was interested in girls. I just knew I was not interested in boys, but I didn't know if that was just because they were high school boys, and you don't know, right? So I just didn't know what to make of it. I mean, locker rooms were tough for me as a kid in high school playing sports. I always I like walk in with my head down and like change in the bathroom. I never wanted to make anyone uncomfortable. I was always like worried, like, oh, don't like look at anyone. Like I wouldn't look at anybody, but I was worried.
Did you know what that was at the time? Because I kind of had that as well too.
There was no words for it. And I was also in North Carolina. You have to remember, like we're still in the South.
This is not
in the 90s.
90s.
I was in high school like 96. I graduated 2000.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in North Carolina, yeah, I mean like half our school was like Southern, and the other half had moved there from other places.
Sure.
Yeah.
But you felt that there was something different about you.
I felt I felt like something was off. I felt like something was off, but I didn't have words. I mean, when I came out in college, like my friends were all like, "Oh, finally!" I was just like, and looking back, it's like, yeah, of course.
So college, so you did some sports for extracurricular activities. Can I say that all at once?
Extracurricular.
Yeah, thank you. That voice. Now I know why that voice gets paid. Right there.
That's right. Yeah. I get a real face for radio.
Enunciation.
Awesome.
So with college, what was your major?
Acting. My parents were thrilled. I was supposed to go to I was like a big science buff, so I loved biology and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, Chapel Hill. Like my parents wanted me to go to Chapel Hill. We're big Tar Heel fans. And they're like, you should go like pre-med to Chapel Hill. And I was like, And I quit playing soccer my senior year to do a play. And it got really serious for me. And so I ended up majoring. I got my BFA in professional acting.
BFA is?
A Bachelor of Fine Arts. And in our school at East Carolina at the time, we had a 2-year kind of conservatory program within the program that you had to audition for that was a Meisner-based technique. So, yeah. It's boring, right? It was a big deal for us then because their teacher was a big deal.
So I already asked what a BFA is. I'm going to show my non-theater education here. What is a Meisner technique?
Oh, Meisner's a technique. Like there's different techniques for acting that people train in. There's like Stella Adler, Uta Hagen, Meisner, Stanislavski. Everything stems from Stanislavski. It's just different ways of having a toolbox of things that you can draw from. And a lot of people use lots of different things. I don't know how much you want to get into Meisner. Not many people really want to talk about that. But I mean, it's a pretty intense, program to take for 2 years. So I found that when I got to Chicago and was doing Second City stuff and doing improv, it was like a nice.
It complemented.
It kind of complemented it, but it also was like freeing to be doing improv.
So talking about college experience, so in your coming out process, so you said before that you felt like something was off. when did it like dawn on you that it wasn't something that was off? It was, this is just who you were.
There's like a couple different moments, but where I knew who I was, my freshman year of college, and I literally had to like look in the mirror and like say the words. And even then it was bisexual. That was the words, that was the word I had. I grew up, going to church. I grew up in a very religious family. I was like in the choir. I was Sunday school. Like I was there. So I had like a lot of issues with marriage, and I had like a lot of religious stuff as well. And a lot of fear of like, telling my family, and like they could never know. Like I thought they would never know. The rest was so young and everything, but I didn't want to hurt anybody. And so that was the word that worked for me at 19 in North Carolina.
Got it.
In 2001 or whatever it was. Yeah.
If we think back, like that was, 20 years ago, and there just wasn't there was almost no representation on television. And what was there was so limited.
It wasn't on TV really that I know of, but I used to go to Blockbuster and like rent. There was one section. It was one half a wall. It was a half wall. They didn't even have enough for a full wall. A half wall, but they just had a little rainbow on it.
Huh.
And I in high school would go and rent. And it was basically just a wall of Angelina Jolie movies, but Hackers, Foxfire, like anything. And then it was like Boys Don't Cry and all these great movies. But I'm a Cheerleader, Jamie Babbitt, like all these films. And so I was watching them. I didn't know why I was watching or why I liked them. I just couldn't put two and two together. I don't know why. Maybe because we weren't allowed to, I think.
What do you mean?
Like in that space, in that time.
Yeah.
Like I even remember doing like in high school, I did a talent show and we wanted to sing something from Rent. Rent was on the rage. Rent was like everything in high school if you were into musical theater. And we wanted to sing the Maureen and Joanne song.
Oh.
And our high school, I remember this recently, would not let us sing it as two women. We could only do the song if a man took one of the roles. I actually remember that.
Wow.
And so I don't think that we did it. I don't remember. But yeah, I remember that was like a stipulation, or we had to change some words or something like that. So anyways, I was sneaking these movies kind of home. And so I say this because it means a lot to me since I've been in LA, that getting to meet some of these people, or they're the people that were making the stuff in the 90s. That was the representation. And it was not much.
Right. So you said earlier too, that you came from this religious background.
Yes.
Eventually, when you come out, how did that go with your family?
Not great. And I didn't tell them until I graduated from college. So this was 3 years that I held on to a secret.
Wow.
And by that point, I was like, I was experimenting. I was
dating girls.
I was in college, I was in college. It was like work hard, play hard.
Gay bars.
Yeah, we had one gay bar in Greenville. It was called the Paddock Club, and it's still there. And I think they're doing a documentary about it. Sandra Bullock actually talks about it because she went to the same school. But it was an amazing club because we all went there, and it didn't matter. It was actually better than sometimes going to a club in New York City because we all accepted each other. There weren't it wasn't like, oh, here's the gay boys and here's the gay girls and here's, the drag queens. It was like, no, everyone welcome.
Right.
And we all support each other because it's the only place we had.
Yeah.
And it was actually really lovely. If I think back on it, it was really special.
That's kind of you nailed it right there. Because I think about some of the smaller towns that I lived in, South Bend, Indiana, and there was maybe two or three bars. And there was really just like the one big bar, and it's gone. It was called Truman's. It's gone today. But it was like a
safety net.
Yeah, safety net that everyone just kind of fell into.
Yeah,
and it was just so cool. Like just seeing everyone, you could just like walk around the main room and just kind of get to have a different experience as you walked across the room with different people.
Were there multiple? I don't know if in your because you grew up in Chicago, but so you had more to choose from, but were there multiple rooms? Was it like a compound? This is what it was in Raleigh.
Compound.
That's what it was in Raleigh. It was like Legends. And then there was like the bar. And then in the back was like the poles and stuff for like the drag show and dance floor. And then there was like the part, I guess, for playing pool, and there were some very tough ladies there. And then you went out back and there was a courtyard where everyone was smoking. And then after that, there was like a martini bar. I mean, it was something for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Everyone.
we had downstairs was the drag show was downstairs, and then upstairs was like the big dance area. But like so the drag show would be like early matinee, like 9:00, whatever.
Matinee.
Yeah, matinee, drag matinee.
Oh man,
yeah, and
I
then,
love a good drag show.
Oh,
It makes me so proud. It makes me so happy.
Yeah.
unlike anything else, and drag has changed obviously over the years, but at its best, it's entertaining. It's fun. It's empowering.
It reminds me of coming out. It reminds me of coming out, which is why I love it. It just reminds me of being 19 and going to the paddock. And so like, I think the last drag show I went to was in Toronto when we went for the film. After our screening one night, I ended up at a drag club in Toronto, and it just made me feel like I was like 19 again or something.
Yeah.
It was empowering, like you're saying.
Yeah. No.
Well, there's something about what like drag shows, especially back then, they just brought everybody together. Everyone could come and watch, and they were entertaining and they were uplifting, and also
And accepting.
accepting and just being able to sort of be in I think about those times like you're hiding this secret from your family, right, while you're in college, but you're able to go to this compound or this bar. It's the one place where you could fully relax, and it's almost like you could take a deep breath and not be worried, because you knew that anybody who you had to quote unquote hide from was not going to be there. So I think that there's just something even more joyous when you're able to watch these performers come on and do this. It was like it was the part of the emotional connection to it is that you were in a space where you felt fully comfortable to be able to be yourself.
Yeah. And they were very, I don't know if this is something, that happens at every drag show, but like we would go up and give like, there would be like a line.
To tip?
To tip. There would be a line. And I just remember being so nervous at first, but then so proud to be a part of that.
Stand up.
Stand up and give a tip or something like that. And it was like such a show of respect. But I think what really is so heartwarming is how I was, I could cry. I mean, sorry, it's a pandemic. Whatever. Is how accepting they were of me. And I didn't really have acceptance. I did from my friends, of course. I lived in the theater, but this was someone I didn't know who, I don't know how to explain it.
No, it was, but
powerful.
And that's right. You said the word, you said powerful. So there's something about whether we talk about, with Marsha, P. Johnson throwing that brick, and, there is, when someone finally stands up and shatters a farce or a glass ceiling, when that drag queen gets on stage. And sometimes there's people that are maybe there for a bachelorette party, and it used to make me uncomfortable for different reasons when that would happen, because I was like, I felt like this was like my safe place. And to be fair, in the beginning, I was like, what if somebody sees me who's not one of us, and then tells my family or my friends that I'm gay? Was really probably what was going through my head in the beginning. Yeah. But then back to your experience. So when you would wait in line, when you would give that drag queen that tip, and they're up on, maybe it's just like a 2-foot table that they're standing on, whatever that stage is.
It was a nice stage at the paddock.
Yeah.
It was actually mostly everyone went for the drag shows. Oh. Yeah.
And then when you get to go, it's like there's almost like a transfer. When you give that money, they look you in the eye.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. They
that
look
eye
you in the eye.
you and I are looking at each other across the table right now, and it's just like we both know what that is.
Yeah. And just that standing there in like the true expression of who they are, and I was standing there in the true expression of who I was. And so it was like that moment, that's what it was, that moment of connection that was probably, and I can't believe this came up, and it's very emotional for me, like surprisingly so, because it so just kind of strips away all the layers of everything to your core part of who you are, being safe to express it. And it's a really special thing.
I think it's, I think back on that time in my life around that, that age, and you think about like as just being, just to be yourself. We had to go through, even though like I grew up in a big city, I still was kind of careful, or, wasn't like I was out, but I wasn't like out to everybody. I was still at that age, I was still, careful who I was out to. But I feel like there are people that just take for granted that you could just walk out the door and not think about, do I look too gay? Am I too flamboyant? Is this color shirt okay? Is my hair okay? Do I have the right shoes on? Are they too clicky? Is my bag the right bag? It just, to be able to stand in your own shoes and feel comfortable with who you are. That's what going to gay bars when I was, 19, 20, 21, whatever it was. That's where I felt same thing. We just felt fully comfortable in my shoes and did not care what anybody else thought.
Yeah. That was, yes, it was a safe place.
Yeah.
And it's sad because at least I know a lot of like the lesbian bars, I guess you could say lesbian bars have closed over the years, and they really are just like a safe haven where like you feel like you can have fun and you're not being like, stared at or something. Like you could just be yourself.
There's something to like, and also with some of these, you're with different generations too. There's this bar in South Bend that's still open called Vicky's. And when Anthony and I are back home visiting my parents, we there's something we love to be able to go out. And then there's people that I grew up with that are, you get to run into. And he knows people that I love being able to go back to a small town, gay, lesbian bar, for a place still today, the ones that do still exist. There is an episode of True Blood, taking you back a little bit here.
I never watched True Blood. I feel like and like Dexter and all. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, same generation, right? Not to give away too much of it, but there's vampires, there's fairies, it's very interesting. And there's this point where they enter this dimension where like the fairies live, and it's like this safe place, I think, where the vampires can't get them. And the minute I saw that, I was like probably in my early 20s then, and I was kind of in and out. I've been doing that in and out of the closet thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's Truman's. That's the gay bar. Like, and I just got chills. I was like, this is like the magical place.
Yeah, yes.
Which, I mean, like we could talk about like the, people being called, fairies, for over the years and what that means. But I was like, straight up fairy right here. That's me. Like,
Yeah. Well, the terminology's changed, and I've heard all kinds of slang that maybe would not be acceptable today that gay people would say toward other gay people back in the day. It's a different generation even from us. But it all comes, I mean, if it's from I don't know. Let's not go down that road. I feel like it's like that's a whole other thing.
I think it's coming down from a place of love.
It's coming. It's all from a place of love and acceptance and chosen family and protection and all the good stuff. But I wanted to say something about the gay bar thing because you got me onto a thought process. Sure. Gay bars are a really important part of our culture and history. And I'm going to give 3 quick examples of things. Okay. 1, I love Frameline Film Festival in San Francisco. It's just the most supportive LGBT film fest. And it's the oldest LGBT film fest in the country, I think. And it's in San Francisco. I had the opportunity to play Freelancers Anonymous at the Castro Theater there, which is one of my dreams come true. But on the corner on Market Street is it's called Twin Peaks. It's a gay bar that has all glass. It's the only, and I think it's the first gay bar that had windows. Oh. And it's right on the corner of Castro and Market, I think. And such a fun, great place. But just think about that. It's the first bar in the United States, I think, with windows. So you're talking about
gay bar, you mean?
Gay bar, gay bar. And because it's a safety issue, right? So you're thinking about, like you mentioned, Marsha P. Johnson and Stonewall. And it reminded me of the second thing, which was a documentary that I saw in San Diego at the film festival there that was the history of gay bars in San Diego, which had the most gay bars in the United States post World War II.
San Diego?
San Diego.
Really?
Because of all the U.S. Navy men and women who came back from war who didn't go back to the rest of their hometowns who were gay.
Yeah.
And they would marry each other, and, there were like white male straight business owners that were like, money's green, I don't care, and set up these businesses. And there was like a whole underground network. Oh man, it's an amazing documentary. I should try and I got to meet one of the women who was interviewed in it. But it's interesting because the gay bars, all the entrances had an L shape. I don't know if you know this in your town. Right. And it's because if someone were to throw a rock or a brick or shoot or anything through the door, it would hit the wall and not anybody.
Huh.
And it was a safety thing. And so it was just like really the history of that, to know that was like, wow, think about that. It was when you were walking into these bars, that's what it was.
Well, that somebody had to sit there and think that through. Like they were designed that way. Someone, that's what you had to worry about.
Yeah, exactly.
Which we take that for granted today.
Yeah. And so I'll leave it at that. But it just made me, when you're talking about gay bars, like I'm so interested in the history of our
Lisa,
community.
You mentioned the Castro Theater in your film. We're going to talk more about that in a minute, so we'll hold place for that. But can we talk about shame for a little bit here?
Sure.
Here we go.
We didn't want to get off. Yes, shame.
Here we go.
Hand sanitizer. Let me just clean up for this conversation.
So, we were also talking about growing up in the part of your life and then this experiences. Would you say that there was any shame in your life?
Yeah. This is what I was saying. I think that I am going through, and maybe it's because this pandemic situation here in LA, this kind of lockdown that we've been in, I've spent primarily, alone. So you had a lot of time to think, you had a lot of time to write, you had a lot of time to figure some things out. I feel like I had a moment during this past 5 or 6 months, recently, like a month ago, that sparked something in me that made me realize that I actually need to go through another coming out, that I didn't complete the coming out process.
The first time around?
And I mean this not in my sexuality. I mean this in not being ashamed of my sexuality, not being ashamed of my womanhood, not being ashamed of my femininity or my butchness or my androgyny, but really my femininity, because deep down I feel very feminine. And that's not always, how I present, I guess. And it's as an actor, it's as a writer, it's owning my artistry, it's owning my art, it's owning my career, my money, owning it. And I think that I haven't ever really owned it all. And it's taken me a long time. And I've wanted to let go of this shame and the fear for a very long time. And I knew that I've had to. And something about this year, I gave myself permission to. And so I feel like I'm coming into whatever this next chapter is, but I'm coming into my own.
I really appreciate you talking about this. And I'm just really grateful for the timing of this conversation, that you're, kind of fresh off this introspective experience with yourself. And I've been really privileged to have a few other friends that have had different self-discoveries, but yours is like peeling back these layers of, to me, I call it my onion. Like I have layers that I keep peeling back. But all of these things that you mentioned, butch, femininity, these are all rich things that make you who you are. And to be able to hold space for all of these things. Because I know sometimes with myself, if I find one thing, I have blinders on and I can only see that aspect of my life. Oh,
I'm great at compartmentalizing. That's my producer brain. Right. Sure.
But when I can dance, like the whole dance, like with everything and be all the different,
it's sort of like today how I guess like kids are coming out now, and we can say that, people could say I'm queer and they can embrace if it's someone who identifies as a man, they can embrace their masculinity, their femininity, they can
non-binary.
I didn't even know that was possible.
And I feel
I'm learning that from the generation behind.
Right. Well, and I feel like, for us, like our generation, it was like the generation right before us fought so hard for us to all have our place. LGBT, it was almost so important for us to be able to categorize ourselves so that we had space in the world, so that people identified who we were, and that we could work through the oppression and the struggles that we had. But now that generation, this other generation, they really have taken it, they've evolved it into not having to put yourself into a box, and that you could just be who you are. And some days you might feel a little more butch, and some days you might feel a little more feminine, or whatever the case is. And you're just giving yourself permission to be yourself.
That is totally, yes, 100%. I don't know what else I would add. I always say to people too, it's like for the generation before us and what they did for our community, it's just amazing. And we came in at the end, I remember 2008 and Prop 8 and marching in Chicago. I even marched in New York and then Obama, being there that night for Obama in 2000. I mean, it's just amazing to be a part of that. And now the generation kind of behind us, like the word queer didn't exist the way it exists. Even maybe 7 years ago, it just didn't, it wasn't a word or an option. I didn't even, I'll be real honest, I didn't like the word. I thought it was, at the time, obviously I've learned and been quiet and started to meet more people and listen, which is a great tool. I didn't like the word because a lot of people, I felt like, were politicizing it within the community, or they were saying queer because I don't want to put myself in a box, but then I thought they were putting themselves in a box by saying they were queer. So I was like, I don't get it, which is really honest. And it makes me feel, kind of bad to say, but it's not how I feel today.
Yeah.
It's not where my evolution and my learning and my understanding of this community has grown into, or wanting to learn more about the trans community and really understanding the non-binary community, and like all of those spaces for humanity are just beautiful. So it's like, why would I be caught up on a word? Let people be who they are. And, and it had a lot probably to do with me not giving myself permission to be who I was. And and they were giving themselves permission to.
You said earlier, while we started this conversation, or when you first expressed all the wonderful things you have been able to accept about yourself over the last few months, by having more quiet time.
Well, I'm still stepping into that.
Well,
once we can step outside.
Well, right. Once we can, but you said something that it's a common thing I hear from people, and myself as well, is the word "let go." And what I say to people is that that's great, but if you don't know if you haven't done enough work on yourself, like if you haven't gone into maybe that dark, scary basement that can be in between the ears, you don't know where you're. At least I can't say for you. I don't know really what I'm letting go of until I identify what it is or where I want to go.
I didn't even know that it was the word shame until I was on the phone describing this kind of epiphany that I was having about a second coming out to somebody, and the word shame popped up. And I started to get very, very emotional, and I was like, that's what it is. It's like some sort of internalized homophobia that's, or that's ruled, it's also being a woman. It's also just thinking you're not worth anything. I try to tell my brother, I'm like, I think every woman wakes up every morning and makes the decision that it's going to be a good day. Makes the decision. I mean, women, because we're told that we're not enough. We're in this world where, there's certain ideals and ideas about what a woman should look like and be and all these kind of things. So that's what we grew up with. So every day I feel like I've been fighting to just say, you deserve things, you're worth things,
I am enough.
I am enough. Or I think for a long time I was trying to figure out if I even liked who I was. And then I just, and so once, in my 30s and producing and, all these kind of things, you start to realize what you're capable of, and you even surprise yourself.
That's true.
And that surprise of like producing Freelancers and even Easy Abby early on made me realize that I'm capable of so much more than I even know. And that got me really positive and curious about, I don't even know what I'm capable of moving forward, and what a gift it is to be here to figure that out. Right. So now it's just, what is the purpose?
Yeah. You said that magic word, curious. And curious is like kids at work. You see Anthony's sister had a baby a little over a year ago, and he's curious, right? You've seen, you've got nieces and nephews.
Yes,
right?
there's 3 of them.
Curious they are.
Yes, they're very curious.
Right, and we get taught that, there are places we shall not go, things how you should not act. And we learn shame through that process. And for me specifically, being like, and I can't speak for being a woman, there's a lot to carry there that doesn't need to be, that should be set free, I think. And understanding the fact that like, shame is like, don't hit somebody, don't hit the kid next to you on the bus. Like, don't speak badly to your parents, don't harm animals, like don't do harm unto others or yourself, basically. Right. But then when this problem comes is that when it's like who you are as a being is supposedly bad or immoral, that is a journey of unpacking.
Yeah, I've been unpacking that for years. Now I've gotten to a good place with that.
And obviously you have, because you said the magic word curious.
Yeah, curiosity is probably the best. It's probably the best thing that you can be.
That's a gift of a place to be in.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah, it is.
It's really fun because what it does is it doesn't pigeonhole you in a way, because I'm such a goal-oriented, you know me. I'm like, well, if I'm going to make it, what's the point? Okay, there's only so much time. What platform do I want to pitch it to? You know, it's just like my brain is always in go mode career-wise, but I have to let go of that, because if you're just curious about things, and this happened with Easy Abby, Easy Abby was interesting because it's my first project really on camera as an actor and producing. And we just made a thing. I had no expectations. I was just curious and had fun. And we put it out there. And this is like 2013. And as far as web series go, we crushed it. We had 14 episodes that did like 50 million views on YouTube.
Wow.
And, you know, it was probably me just sitting playing. No, I'm just kidding. But this is at a time when web series were a little different. So to me, it was like, I had no expectations. I was just curious, and we just put a thing out there that came from the heart, and look at
the response.
Look at the response.
Yeah, and I think you said it. I think it's, you know, there are so many times where, you know, we all have ideas. We all have things that we think that we can do, but unless you act on those ideas and you create a plan and you put the plan into motion and then you create it, it's never going to happen. Right. But I also think too, you said you gave it the secret ingredient. You gave it love. And when you give a project, or you give anything that you're creating, you know, if you're starting a business, or you're shooting a film, or you're cooking in the kitchen, whatever it is, I remember my grandma said this to me when I was a kid. My grandma was the big entrepreneur in the family, and, you know, owned restaurants and bars and hotels and all that stuff.
Badass.
And she sure was. But I remember asking her one time, I said, what's the secret ingredient? Why do people keep coming back to our restaurants, or why are our restaurants so successful? And she's like, because I cook with love. And it's that simple concept. It's not just love. It's also the dedication that goes into it, to making sure that every bite of food that would leave that kitchen, that would go out into the dining room, would be as delicious and perfect as it can be. And it's the same thing.
You're driven by purpose.
Right.
When you're driven by purpose, dedication just happens.
Right.
So yeah, then you're just, when you have that kind of dedication, it's always done with love, right? So, I mean, and that's the thing I learned with Freelancers, was people don't invest, and I'm not just talking about money, I'm talking about invest in you as a person, or as an artist, or whatever it may be. They don't invest in a project, they invest in you, rather. They invest in you. It's an amazing process of like letting people see who you are.
Yeah.
And knowing who you are, and loving who you are, and owning that.
And, Brene Brown's done a lot on vulnerability over the last few years. It's really giving people permission to dive into that. And with that vulnerability, back to what you're talking about here, is connection. And if people know really what I am and what I'm about, then they can connect with me and we can get stuff done.
Yeah. As we've been talking, I've also been thinking about what that connection.
Yeah.
That's something I've been lacking in certain areas of my life, where I don't want them to lack. And it has to do with holding on to fear and shame. So I've been kind of hiding out. I have been hiding out. It's a term I've been using for the past year or so. And I've been completely aware of it, and I don't want to do it anymore. And that's why I wanted to talk with you guys about this, because I think I've been even reassessing my career. I'm like, why is it that you work so much in voiceover and not as much on camera, like, or on stage? And you're literally hiding. You're doing all this work. Isn't that like, I was just like, you gotta own yourself in the room when you're auditioning. You gotta own it all the time. You can't hide. And you know, in lots of aspects of my life, I've hidden, and I just don't want to hide anymore. Yeah. I think it's because I had to give myself permission to let people see me and still be able to protect all the good parts of me to the best of my ability.
Those boundaries are important.
Yeah.
At the same time.
I think I'm just learning what those are for me.
Yeah.
It's weird. Yeah.
Well,
it took me a while.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I came to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, I feel like with what you do for work, you know, professionally, always putting yourself out there. So you 9 times out of 10, I mean, as we know this, is that you get told no because it's just how the numbers work, right?
Sure, and I'd love to be booking at 10%.
Right.
That'd be great.
So, but the part of it too is that if you're not comfortable with yourself and you don't feel good, I mean, it's really hard to show up at 100% when you know that there's a higher percentage that you are going to get rejected.
Yeah. I never even used to think about rejection. I was like, I'm not even worried about competition or rejection. I just went into this with audition. That's the job. And you get the job. It's the icing on the cake and you get to go to work. I never thought about it. But then we were talking about this, I think briefly, is that after like 10 years, 12, 13 years of auditioning, we have pops of good stuff that happens, but pops, I started to realize, I was like, oh my God, I have like PTSD from hearing no. Like it like caught up with me.
Yeah.
And so I took some time away from, that's the thing about this situation that we're in right now. Everything slowed down and stopped. So I actually took time away from acting or even reading the trades or anything like that. Like I just stopped.
So it sounds like you've had time to really find yourself in a lot of this and discover some of these underlying, thoughts that you've had and these, things that have held you back. What are some of the tools you've used to discover these and work through these?
Sitting in silence, talking with with my brothers, really close with both my brothers and my parents. But also, I think for me, I almost need a little separation from my family to figure out who I am. Because we're such a close, like, Italian family.
I completely understand.
Yes, Navarro. So also spirituality, more so than religion, has been very important to me for the past, for always, but finding my way of having a spiritual connection and a groundedness, like a check-in, like daily. A daily check-in routine. That's something that's helped me.
Do you do that like in the morning when you first wake up, or is that something that happens nighttime? Yeah.
Before I go to sleep. It's just very peaceful for me, and it reconnects me to the ground.
So you said silence. So when you say that time, is there one time that's specifically listening and then another time where you're talking to this?
Well, I joked with my brother. I was like, look, if I start talking to the walls in my apartment, come get me. It happens. I've been like journaling when I need to like write stuff out, or it'll get expressed in like an idea for like a short film, or my brain just goes there. I'm like, oh, what's the story of this? And I've also been writing a ton. So that's been very helpful. But in the moments of silence, I don't really talk out loud. It's like I'm just listening and just being and trying to stay present in the moment. And then if something comes to me or sparks something emotional or in any direction emotional, I feel like I have to like write something down. That it's, also meditation is new for me, but I have a lot of anxiety. I've dealt with like depression and anxiety. And so these like guided meditations are like really helping me to go to sleep. And you know how I feel about earthquakes, and you know how I feel about,
Tell us how you feel about earthquakes.
I just got my red pack from Red Fora. I got it for 2 just in case I'm stuck for longer. I have a whistle by my bed. Guys, I'm like nuts about these earthquakes and being alone.
Our well-prepared earthquake writer here. Lisa,
Oh, man.
we've mentioned freelancers. We talked about a couple of different things. You did Easy Abby in 2013.
The main character you played, Abby, was a lesbian. And that was one of the very few web series that was available at the time that had a full like gay cast.
Yes. Yeah. And I should mention, I mean, obviously it was created, with Wendy Jo Carlton, who's, just a really fun, writer director, and she gave me a shot.
But I think what's interesting about, thinking about web series back in like 2013, 2014, and looking at like what's available in the media today, web series played such an important role for the LGBTQIA plus community for many reasons, but one of them is representation. And I think one of the reasons why people responded so well, not only with Easy Abby being well written, well produced, like acting was great. I mean, all of those components were there, but part of it was that it was another story where you got to see a version of yourself on the
Yeah.
screen.
Exactly.
And I think, because it was a time where content for the community wasn't on television, wasn't on Netflix, it wasn't available.
Do you think about, I have to ask you this, you think you're going to get no's, like you're aware of that? Like, do you say that? So you're like, yeah, I know I'm going to get some no's, but.
I don't even, I'm so focused on where I'm going.
Yeah, because I never even think about a no.
Yeah,
Like if I'm making something, I'm just like, I'm in yes. And if you're a no, then get out of my way. That's kind of like.
Right.
Yeah. And on,
Yeah.
on the rare occasion, there might be something where if I give someone my ear for a minute, where I can be like, oh, well, they may have something that I can pivot from here a little bit, or something that I can take with me on this journey to get where I'm going. But generally speaking, there's a science, right, that you talked about meditation, contemplation, and that a negative thought sticks to the brain, like generally like Velcro, generally speaking.
I believe it.
And that for an actual,
But like old school 80s Velcro.
yes, yeah, those kangaroos.
With those
Like
double,
those-
with
yeah,
the double.
those kangaroos, right?
Yeah. They're kangaroo. That's right. Mm-hmm.
So, but then with like a positive energy and stuff, you actually have to. They say that you have to actually sit in it, and it takes 7 to 8 seconds for it actually to stick to the brain. But when I've actually when I've been in a good place, and I've been able to maintain like my spiritual condition, that thing, that conscious desire impact that I'm trying, it's there like glowing with me. It's there. I'm in
It's
it.
like around you.
Yeah. And you just keep going. And you're so, you got those not blinders, but you're just keep looking on the thing
Focused.
ahead. You're
It's
focused.
a focus, and you're drawn to so when you're working on something, project, you're building a business, you're doing whatever it is that you're doing, and you wholeheartedly believe in your mission and you believe in yourself. There's also, I think, sort of I've been there a few times. There's also sort of this like out of body spiritual experience where you hear, or you have this feeling that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, that there is no other space. So it's like when those no's, or when those people, those negative people come in place, it's almost like you have a shield around you that you're just being able to plow through that. And it doesn't even matter what they say. And you just keep moving forward because you are focused on your task at hand. I know, like, I don't talk about this a lot on the show, or haven't talked about this, but, building, an event company, an event planning company. I mean, I can look back and say there were pivotal moments in my career as I was building the company where I knew whether it was a time where I would have to pivot, or there was, or I just had to keep going. I remember when I first got started, it took me a whole year just to get it moving. And I remember wanting to quit and not do it anymore. I took a meeting with this other event company, and they wanted to hire me. They wanted to give me a job. And I went out to this office, and I pulled into the parking lot, and I walked in, and I basically went to interview as I'm like, kind of have this like half company, company started.
Yeah.
And I walked out of the interview and I was like, okay, I could totally work here, and I'll have a salary, and I'll have insurance, and I'll have all of these things. And I remember walking out of this interview, and I saw in the parking lot a sign.
You've never told me
And
this.
it's I know, but I saw this sign in the parking lot, and it was for a parking space. It said, for the CEO. And I thought, that's the parking space I want to have. I'm not taking this job. I'm going to keep going on my path. And not instantly, but within, a couple of months, everything turned around, and it was like things were just flowing.
It's like that quote that's just like, once you make the decision to do something, the world or the universe conspires to make it happen.
Yeah.
Which I absolutely love, because it's so true.
Right.
Once you start moving in that space, it's pretty amazing how powerful it can be when things start to align. Yeah, it's pretty great.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's how freelancers happen.
Yeah. So
Let's talk about that.
There's a lot of alignment. That's when my spiritual journey really started. I really started to own and figure out what my spiritual journey was about.
Freelancers Anonymous.
Freelancers Anonymous is a feature film comedy that we shot in Chicago for 4 weeks. Sonia Sebastian is our director. And I basically just asked all my very successful actor friends on TV if they would go to bat for me and be in this movie with me. In my like small size brain, I was like, maybe I'll be able to get like a really good theatrical agent from this. Let me tell you, that's not what this journey was about at all. This journey was about learning how to believe in yourself. It was about learning how to put something out into the world that could reach people halfway across the world. One of the greatest moments of Freelancers Anonymous for me was, yes, the Castro Theater was amazing because it was just amazing. But was one, seeing the credits at the end of the film. It was probably one of my favorite parts of the movie because I realized that I made it possible. Our team, all of us, Amy Deladrino, my co-writer, we made it possible to hire like 250 people.
Wow.
And I was so proud of that. I was so proud for my parents to come see it in North Carolina. Both my parents came and it was a big deal. And that was awesome. And one of the other great moments was being in Sydney.
Sydney, Australia.
And you know how I feel about flying, if you know how I feel about earthquakes. And I got on and I was like, I had a chance to go to see, you were with me the night before I left.
The night before you left, I was at
like
your
terrified.
apartment.
I was like, please God, let me get there. Oh man, I drank so much red wine on that flight, at least to Hawaii. And then I like passed out. But I went to Sydney and it was amazing. The theater was almost sold out for the screening, which was great. I don't even think if she listens to this, it's awesome. This woman came up to me, was in a Freelancers Anonymous t-shirt that I had made here in downtown LA during our Seed and Spark campaign. And she was from Perth, which is like clear across the other side of Australia. And she flew in. It's like flying across the United States, like flew in to Sydney to see our screening. And I was like, oh my God, I could cry. It's like, it basically taught me how far an idea can take you and how far an idea can reach. And that not only is that an amazing thing, but it also taught me about the responsibility that I have with this amazing, cool superpower of like, I love big ideas, but I also, have failed many times along the way. I failed a lot, and that's okay. I don't even know if you'd call it failure. I think I don't even think you call it failure. I think it's like going for something all the way, no matter what, and just doing the best you can in the moment that you are.
Well, and it's taking it's a learning lesson. So what didn't work, it's taking the knowledge that you got from that experience and applying it to the next go around, the next project, the next, whatever it is.
And it always takes me time to recoup. It's been a couple years. So I'm just kind of like, and it makes me feel, that goes back to that shame, right? Where I want to hide, where I'm like, oh man, I wanted it to be this thing, but it wasn't. Well, it was this, but because you put expectation on it. And so then you're holding on to the shame of being embarrassed or feeling like a fool or something, which is so ridiculous because it takes a lot of courage to make things happen. Everyone out there who's an actor producing or anybody making a business from scratch, like keep going because it takes guts. And then I think what's going to happen, hopefully, is that the rebound time as I create, it just won't be like this anymore. I just feel like I'm in a place where I'm so excited to create.
So with Freelancers, I know we saw it. It was at the Chicago Reeling Film Festival.
Yes.
You were in multiple film festivals.
We did 30 film festivals internationally. Yeah.
So, and these film festivals, just so people, because I didn't start going to film festivals till in the last couple of years, and they're jured. You don't just, you it's a big deal to get it, invited to even, to be part of it and then be accepted. And you opened or closed, I think, Chicago, didn't you?
We opened Chicago.
Yeah, you opened Chicago, which is an honor.
It was an honor to do. And because we shot it in Chicago and like half our cast is from Chicago, our crew, we shot locally.
And you mentioned some of your wonderful friends and people that you would really look up to, you worked with.
Oh, I got to give them a shout out.
Yeah.
Well, Chicago folks, I mean, we got to say Alexandra Billings. It's just amazing to have Alexandra Billings there. And Mausa Makar, who I did a play with years before, Haviland Stillwell, who I've known for years from New York, Jennifer Bartels, who I went to college with at East Carolina. We went through the same Meisner program together. I've known her forever. It's like going through the cast. Megan Kavanaugh, who is from A League of Their Own, who I met when I moved here, who's from Chicago.
Who did she play in A League of Their Own?
She played Marla Hooch.
Yeah.
And she's just like the most lovely human.
And just in Freelancers too, just adorable.
She's so cute. Yeah. I just love her so much. I've always wanted to meet her, and I was so nervous. I remember the day that I met her here in LA. My friend Sean introduced us, and he was like, "Would you want to meet her?" I was like, "Oh my god, I totally want to meet her." And he was like, "Oh, there's this bar in Hollywood that's a Blackhawks bar, and I love hockey." So I was like, "Yeah, let's go see the Hawks." So I went and I met her, and I was like, "Oh man, I gotta work with her. It's like a dream." Because you grow up watching this stuff, I don't know. And then you meet people and then you're in LA and you're like, oh yeah, everyone's hustling around.
Yeah. And then I think I don't know, part of that then goes to is that they're just people. The people that want to work and that want to
and very
collaborate.
kind. Just very kind people too.
And what you kind, beautiful people got to create together was something that maybe wasn't necessarily represented before with tech and women.
Ah, yes. Well, this is the other thing Freelancers did for me. It started to kind of like shore up, get a little bit clearer shape on what my purpose is, which I think has something to do with women in tech and bringing light to that. I don't know anything about tech. However, my family does. So especially my mom, who just retired, and I always thought that her job sounded so boring, and now I just have learned what a badass she is for, working at IBM back in the day and being one of the only women, if not the only woman in her department working on like mainframes, or I don't know how much I can say or what I can't say, but it's like IBM. But yeah, I mean, just what a badass, she wouldn't agree with that. My purpose has something to do with bringing to light through film and TV and through stories, women, the LGBTQIA plus and BIPOC communities in tech, in STEM industries, bringing them to light. There's an intersection there, and also in entrepreneurship. So I think that there's how we invest in businesses for women and people of color is just woeful in comparison to white male businesses. I mean, I'm talking about like 1%.
Yeah, I'm shaking my
2%.
No one can see. I'm shaking
like,
my head.
He's shaking his head. It's like nowhere even. It's not even like, oh, it's 37. It's like 70-30. No, it's like 1 or 2% are fully funded. And so I just think that innovation comes from a great place of lots of different points of view. And I can only imagine in the STEM industries, what that encapsulates. So I guess I just want to bring light to it through the stories I tell.
And thank you for doing that. I appreciate your intention with that. And they're entertaining too. Freelancers is very entertaining.
Well, Freelancers is like I think I'm going to look back on Freelancers and be like, oh, Lisa, that's cute.
Lisa.
That was cute. But it served a purpose. It served a next step, a stepping stone. So it was
your curiosity that got you to this place.
Yeah.
So you were curious to create that. Now you're here, and without that, you might not have known that this purpose existed.
Exactly.
Freelancers is available for people to watch in their homes today.
Yes, you can rent it. You can buy it. It's on our website. You can go to our website. And you can rent the movie through VHX is the platform.
Earlier, you were talking about superpowers. So, which I think is interesting.
Superpowers?
Yeah, you did. You brought it up earlier.
God, no.
So I think it's interesting. You've been on this sort of break. You've been doing a ton of voiceover work, doing a lot of audiobooks.
Books are booming.
Yeah. And you told us that you just recorded a book for this little company called Marvel.
Yes.
And it was a story about the Wasp.
I recorded Marvel's young adult novel, The Unstoppable Wasp, written by Sam Maggs, who also writes, comic books and I don't know if graphic novels, but I think this is her first like young adult novel. So, and I didn't know anything about Marvel. I mean, every time a Marvel movie comes out, I'm just like, who's making what's a lesbian film that's coming out? No, I don't know. What's like a foreign film or a short film? Like, I don't watch the big stuff.
Well, you came to see Captain Marvel with us. And I think you liked it.
I went, now look, you have to understand, I went because Brie was in it. So look, and I saw Black Panther for obvious reasons. So now since recording The Unstoppable Wasp, I went and I started watching the Marvel movies because when you got time, you got time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like 3 months ago, and I watched every Marvel movie.
Oh, really?
Welcome to the club.
During this time. I've watched every single one. I started with the Ant-Man and the Wasp because I was like, Wasp, Ant-Man and the Wasp. And I was like, oh, Michelle Pfeiffer? Pfft, totally watching. Sold. Sold. So I started with that. And then I started watching like the second, I think it's broken into like 4 sections of like how you can watch it. So I started in the second or third section and I bounced around. And then you were like, just go to the beginning and watch Iron Man. And I was like, ugh, I remember when they were shooting that in Chicago, it was ridiculous. And I was like so irritated. And then I watched
Transformers.
Probably, yeah, and Transformers. Iron Man was probably one of my top 3 favorites.
It's one of the best.
And it was just excellent. And now I'm into all those movies.
So what's it like?
Sorry, we're talking about an audiobook.
It's okay. No, I'm glad that you went there. What's it like to record a book about a superhero who is a woman?
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
I've recorded a lot of books. This year's really a special year. Probably or early next year is a special year for me as a narrator because I'm going to hit 100 titles.
Wow.
So I'm very excited. Thank you. I'm like really excited to hit that number. Most of the books that I've read, a lot of the books I do, a lot of young adult fiction, teen romance, a lot of series, cozy mystery, small town murder mystery kind of stuff, some nonfiction, but I've never gotten to do like a superhero book with superpowers. And it was all based, and see, this is how it comes back, guys. It was all based in STEM. This girl is a young scientist, right, with her crew of friends, and they're talking about the PIM particles and being able to shrink, and they go into all the molecular. I mean, it goes into all that stuff, and then there's a queer relationship between 2 of the women, and I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. So it sits in my voice where I usually work in the market, we'll say, but it also sits in my purpose, right? Which is to bring light to stories. And this book it just came to me. So it was an offer that came. And I've done several books about young girls, like preteen books about girls who want to be, like one was about an astronomer and one was about a girl who wanted to be a coder. So it was all starting to like get these young adult books about women or young women interested in science, tech, engineering, or math. Very interesting. So that's not what I usually record, but I'm so excited that those are the level of books that they have that kind of mission that I'm so interested in sharing. I don't know why I'm interested in it. I honestly don't.
Makes you tick, though.
Just going back and just talking a little bit more about superheroes. So,
oh yeah, okay. Yes.
Do you feel any empowerment in being the voice, the audio voice of a female superhero?
I think, it's so funny because when I'm recording the book, I'm so in the story and you're playing all the characters. So and there's a lot of dialogue and you're bouncing around and you're playing like all these different voices. So I'm so interested in just making sure that I do good service to the story, that I'm not thinking about anything but that. But as you ask the question, it's like probably one of the first times I would think about this because I have a script or a manuscript and I got to tell this story to the best of my ability and bring all these girls, all these young women to life and to understand what their points of view are and to understand where they're coming from, to make those character choices, to get that across just with my voice because that's all that I have in this medium. That's what I'm thinking about. Yes, it does make me feel like I'm a part of putting good into the world. And it makes me feel like I'm a part, I guess is what I was trying to say before, is this kind of a book is like a type of book that's really special to me because there's a purpose. It's not just another acting job. It is a story that I'm proud of. It's a story I want to be a part of. And, and so that it aligns, but it also has such a great message for young queer women, young straight women, young women interested in science, young women of color. Like it doesn't matter. It's for the empowerment of young women, which I mean, I guess I'm not even really aware of that power.
Well, it's interesting.
Does that make sense? I'm just telling the story.
I think it does make sense. And it's a very important question about being empowered with the superhero. But as also the narrator, you're doing all the voices, and to understand that we need everyone, we need all of us, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what my journey has been in as far as like maybe getting to experience people who are, that I did not have experiences with growing up, or was told things about people that I was told to be true about certain people. And then I met them and I was like, this is not really my experience with what I've been told about. And also, I just want to be honest about this. It also has to do with people that sometimes I'm told that have a different view things about me and who I am.
Yeah.
So it's universal. And I think that we are all at our best when we're doing, like, I've had jobs where I'm doing a side hustle, like waiting tables, or, helping a friend with their business or something like that, which is great because I know it's just a means to get me to get to where
stepping stone. Yeah.
It's supporting as well. It's helping with that. So what we can all do, together. And with being that narrator, you get to almost kind of like you're in the air traffic tower control, look down and see how we're all it's like those ants that are building something all together,
I mean, and if you're the wasp, you're flying right over.
Oh, there you go.
And it's just a fun story. It's just I know you're like really into them too. I mean, I started with, again, Brie Larson for obvious reasons.
Sure. I think for me, it was a different, gravitating towards superhero stories was different because growing up, there was a point where for me, that I started getting bullied for, I was being called, queer, gay, whatever it is. And I feel like, having those superpowers, I always thought that I would be able to fight that, which I learned a different route to fight that. But that was always that's why I gravitated.
That makes sense.
Towards
I never had that.
Superheroes.
I never had that. Mine was, I think, those movies that I snuck home from Blockbuster. That was like those little indie films from the 90s that was just like, oh, there's my people. Yeah. That's how I feel too when I walk in a gay bar. I'm like, my people.
Yeah. Whoever you are, gay, straight, female, non-binary, to have people that surround you and encourage you to be who you are and what you're becoming, I am responsible for that. Like the things that were said to me as a child that, that hurt me, I had no part in those. But if those things are still occupying space in my head today,
that's such a good point.
That's I have a part in that. Right. And so when I get to be quiet and then I get to surround myself and I get to hear people that are different than me talk about how, some of the most impactful parts of my life have been late at night hanging out with transgendered individuals, like grabbing, going out to the bars and afterwards, like meeting up for tacos on Belmont after Berlin, and it was like going to church at 4 a.m. on Belmont, after Berlin, like that there was spirituality.
You go to that church?
Well, I'm calling that my church.
Well, it was the taco place.
Oh, okay. I was like, like the church, the one on Broadway? And
no.
Okay.
No. I mean, maybe sit on the bench, eat the taco at 4 o'clock in the morning. But yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I remember those days.
Yeah. So I'm really looking for. I have not.
You said something really important right there too, where you said that that's my responsibility. I think something to that effect, because that's another piece of this ownership and creating boundaries and understanding what those boundaries are for yourself in your life, so you're able to take risk and trust yourself, is holding yourself accountable, which is something that I don't think I ever really grasped the concept of.
Yeah, I know. For Jeff and I, when we're dealing with something, something problematic or something that's maybe outside of our comfort zone, it's the first thing Jeff always says is, what's in our control? What do we have control over? And what do we have control over? And then we look at the situation and say, okay, this is what we have control over. And we can make, A, B, C, or D decisions. And that's what you always have to focus on, is that what you have control over. You can't control what other people are going to do, what other people are going to say. You have no control over that. And you can't let that power take over, any part of your life. You can't let it take over your project that you're working on, your work, whatever it might be, your personal life, your family life, whatever it is. You can only you can only change what you have control over.
Right. And what you're saying there is you're identifying that, right? You're saying that word "let go" we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And then Lisa, you talked about those boundaries. A second ago, I think boundary was the word you used, right?
Boundary is a really good word, because I don't think I've ever really used that word. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think, I don't know. If
it's like a heart on my sleeve thing. You know me. Like I'm like all in or not at all. Yeah.
And I also think too, it's kind of like growing up in like an Italian family. It's like for me, it was always like you always you're not doing what's necessarily right for you. You're doing what's right for the whole clan, for the whole family, right? So there's a part of that where those boundaries don't exist. I remember when my mom was still alive, she told me the story once where she went to go pick up lunch, and I was like, 4 or 5 years old, and we lived in our neighborhood where my whole family lived around. Everybody knew us. Just is what it was. It was a neighborhood where everybody, lived. And somebody came up behind her and put their hands over her eyes while she was standing in line to get food from this takeout place. And she panicked, and the person would not take their hands off of her eyes. And it turned out to just be somebody like a friend of my dad's or a friend of like my uncle's, but it wasn't someone she was close enough to, but he just felt that he could do that to her. And it pushed her to the point where she's like, I need my boundaries. I need my space. And we moved about like a half hour away from this whole community, like where my whole family, my grandparents lived there, my aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody, we left. And part of that, as much as I missed being able to ride my bike to my grandma's house, we had to have those boundaries, because those boundaries, sort of having, your family there and still being a part of their lives, but not every second of every day, it allowed for us to grow in a different way.
Mm-hmm. You have to make space for that to happen.
Yeah.
I think our family has, I won't go too into it. I mean, our family's very close. I grew up in just grateful to have like a loving parents and who've found their way to supporting me, which is just amazing. Just a couple of years ago, showing up to the film festival meant the world to me in North Carolina, in Durham, North Carolina, which just meant a lot. I think we had boundaries so much so that I hid again. So there was a lot of boundaries. We're different Italians. You're from further south. Is the boot kicking you guys away? Because my grandma said that Sicily's not okay.
We're from southern Italy.
All right.
My one grandpa was from Sicily.
All right.
Out of 4.
Okay. All right. Fair. Our family's pretty quiet, like we're reserved kind of family. And I don't think they even know where I came from. And of my friends, I try to describe to them, I'm just like, in the gay community in Chicago, LA, New York, I'm like such a square. I'm like I'm like just a white girl who just happens to be gay, who's just moving through the world, very lucky with privilege in a way that's different for so many people who aren't white. And have that privilege in the gay community. And I'm just moving through the world. And I'm like so square. And my parents think I'm like the kid who moved away, who's like doing all this stuff. And I'm just like, no.
I'm watching Netflix at 8:00 at night in bed.
Killing it. But yeah, we actually had so many boundaries, I think, that I was always looking maybe to the theater or to acting as a way to express myself.
So there's something there that I've had to learn is because I compartmentalized my life so much. Like, if I had 3 different groups of friends, the ones that knew I was gay, the ones maybe like whatever it was. And it was like, if these 3 groups shall ever meet each other, my life will fall apart. My friends from church, my friends from church camp, and my friends from going out to Truman's. And if the 3 of them all, like my
it's like
game,
your worst fear.
I can't even today. It's like, it's just like, it's fine now. But so with the compartmentalizing, it's like, well, what are like I had to compartmentalizing, but what are boundaries? Like, boundaries of like what you can do with my body, like how you can touch me. Like, I've never had someone come up behind me and put their hands and cover my eyes like Anthony's mom did, but to take away someone's agency by doing something like that's what that's really doing there. I don't want to say we joke, because I don't think to make light of that situation, because what's really happening is that you are taking away someone's agency when you're doing something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're putting someone in an uncomfortable situation. And I mean, the thing is that, so obviously I can't speak for her, but knowing her and knowing what she would have, assuming how she would have thought it was, she was a woman with 2 kids and a baby, and me, I was probably like 5, and she felt a man's hands on her face. I mean, I can't even imagine the fear that would create. And I think, going back and like thinking about like obviously how we grew up and thinking about like our neighborhood in Chicago, how that was. I mean, it's very different today, but I think she was wise to say, to be able to identify what that was and what that did to her, to uproot us and move. I mean, I think if that didn't happen, I think my dad would have probably stayed in that house, would still be living in that house,
Wow.
you know? So I feel like when we're challenged with situations like that, I think it's important to listen to that voice inside, or listen wherever it's coming from, and say, I have to make a change because I don't want to live like this.
Yes. When you can say, I want to make a change because I don't want to live like this, I mean, that is powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is so powerful because, you know, you're owning the right to your own life,
Yeah.
you know? And we only have so much time. I mean, that is the thing about this whole, this pandemic. I mean, really, it scared me. It scared me. People that were surrounded in the news, were surrounded with bad things and death and sickness and it's just so much. And, you know, you just start taking stock and being grateful and having gratitude are words that I've said, but did not understand internally, really internalize them in a real way. I think until this year. Every moment is a gift and I want to spend my time wisely, you know?
Well, we could have you back for a whole nother episode just on gratitude alone, I feel like. So,
Yeah,
thanks for bringing that up. I mean, Anthony asked about tools, and that's definitely, a tool in the toolbox that is a great
That always
resource.
calms me down.
Yeah.
It always reminds me.
Lisa, speaking of gratitude, I just want to tell you how much gratitude we have for you being here today. This has been a long time coming.
Yes.
And I think this was the perfect time for this to happen with the three of us. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Just thank you for your friendships, and we love you. And thank you for letting us introduce you to some of our new friends here as well, too.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. I was looking forward to this.
We were really excited to have you. I'm glad it worked out.
Thank you. This is like the outlet we have, right? Is this microphone? So
that's it.
Yeah.
That's where it is.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Lisa's work is important in so many ways. She continues to raise the bar, not only for herself, but for her audience. The work she's creating is more important now than ever. We're excited to keep watching Lisa and see what exciting projects are to come. Make sure you check out Lisa's profile on our website to watch Easy Abby and to rent Freelancers Anonymous. There, you can also check out some of the books Lisa has narrated in our bookstore. Thanks for listening to this episode of Talk Out Loud. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe, rate us, and share with a friend. You can also follow us on social media at Talk Out Loud Live. If you or someone you know has an inspirational story and a member of the LGBTQIA+ community, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on our website at www.talkoutloudlive.com. You can also get your official Talk Out Loud gear in our online store. Thanks again for listening, and remember to be true, be you, and to talk out loud.